The culture changes, and a few fiscal quarters later, Disney notices. Leadership at Disney is pressing Hollywood creatives for movies that will bring young men ages 13 to 28 back to the brand in a meaningful way, specifically original concepts, according to Variety. Disney has been seeking new IP and pitches such as splashy global adventures and treasure hunts. The calls come as the Star Wars machine struggles to produce any film project, and the superhero genre sheds audiences by the minute. Disney is reaching out to and soliciting young men, establishing touch points with them during their formative years, using multiple entrant strategies with boys to achieve deep market penetration through a concerted market thrust, driving frictionless entry into tight media access points, monitoring young men's behavior patterns, and using widespread dissemination to achieve full exposure and acquire as many of these young men as possible, owning the young male space and using widespread seeding to gain conversions. When it comes to young men, Disney is striving to hard bundle its offerings, creating sticky experiences with youths funneled through a cycle of anticipation and capture, positioning boys to be guided smoothly from one release to the next. Disney aims to use market infiltration to earn the trust of young men, to stimulate response rates, offering a wraparound service to drive boys' experiences in actionable engagement with a powerful and influential media partner that seeks to maximize deliverables by servicing as many boys as possible.
I'm disappointed in your species.
For the past decade, Disney has been conducting an experiment of sorts, taking what were once fundamentally boyish IPs, Star Wars and Marvel, and trying to universalize them into something like civic property. Brands for everyone. These were mythologies built on pulp energy, action figures, and adolescent fantasy, and Disney's bet was that, with the right adjustments, they could become platforms for a new, enlightened storytelling consensus. In 2012, Disney acquired Lucasfilm and immediately set about revitalizing Star Wars. The Force Awakens was an enormous hit, but it introduced a template, Rey as the flawless heroine. The Last Jedi doubled down, turning Luke Skywalker into a bitter recluse in order to elevate a new set of female authority figures. By the time The Acolyte limped onto Disney+, the once boyish franchise had been refitted into a sprawling seminar on representation with diminishing narrative spark.
Screeches.
Marvel followed a parallel arc. The first 3 phases culminated in Avengers Endgame, a grand boys' adventure anchored by the charismatic masculinity of Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. Then came the pivot. Black Widow was a lethal seductress. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness turned Wanda into an allegory of maternal rage. She-Hulk collapsed under its own winking meta-commentary, while The Marvels was marketed like an empowerment workshop and performed like one too. Audiences have always embraced strong heroines when they feel like characters rather than initiatives. What Disney offered instead was the focus-grouped strong female character, competent, unflappable, inspiring, and fatally dull. The commercial slide confirmed it. Phase 4 Marvel projects hemorrhaged attention. Disney Plus was flooded with shows that turned content into a slur. And now comes a new pivot. Disney's leadership is reportedly pressing creatives to deliver projects aimed squarely at young men again. Treasure hunts, pulpy adventures, seasonal horror films. In progressive circles, this might feel like regression, a retreat back to the boys' club. But in corporate terms, it looks like realism. After years of trying to universalize Star Wars and Marvel, Disney has wound up with slop product that feels neither universal nor particular, just strangely dutiful. Myths don't thrive when they're utilized for a kind of on-screen egalitarianism. So Disney is drafting strategies to re-engage boys. Variety, in their aloof, incorrigibly blind-spotted and patronizing way, frame boys as misshapen, hampered, with their behavior almost positioned as inadequate, with the implication that it isn't really the entertainment industry's directional choices that are to blame for whatever shortfalls are occurring. Numerous studies, the article says, show that Gen Z men in particular are a lonely, gaming-obsessed group who were hampered in their formative years by COVID-19 lockdowns. Not the easiest segment to grasp. But what's surprising producers, writers, and other partners in the larger industry is that Disney has been calling for original concepts to lure the demo back to the movies. This is couched in terms of the company effectively having to cajole a wayward group to coax them out of their dithering self-exile, without the merest hint, of course, that they might be bored shitless by slop entertainment full of pussyish male characters, strident female substitutes, spiritless storytelling, or lame, uncool content that is lame and uncool because it is just content. This is the same Disney whose multi-billion-dollar content engines, Marvel and Lucasfilm, have sated men of all ages over almost 2 decades since the company acquired them. What are you talking about? The issue is very much one of targeted, practical response, rather than an organic, willing into being of boy-centric content out of impulse or creative inspiration and inherent spirit. If you're strategically tacking to address a demographic issue, that smacks of dry, initiative-based programmatic thinking, even obligation, without the sweetness and authenticity of real imaginative spark and affinity with young male energy and sentimentality and revelry. Just as importantly, Disney will get it wrong again because they will try and court elements of Gen Z they consider malleable and with contemporary notions of masculine comportment and vibe. In other words, subconsciously create content with a blind spot about masses of young guys eager for cool shit. Rather than develop content that acknowledges the rough and tumble, high spirits, power fantasies, appetite for hijinks, the hierarchical tendencies of boys, their rumpus and rollicking energy, gruesomeness and valor, Disney will instead inevitably curate content less for the actual audience out there they could court, and for a perceived, partially imagined audience of boys and young men who are more in the beta-ish, less gender distinct, more self-disparaging, duller variety. Disney either perceives as being the emerging norm, or half-willingly likes the idea of being the emerging norm in boys. They'll end up lapsing in their efforts because they just won't be up to adequately acknowledging and representing and casting and playing to that wider expanse of boys who will remain untapped potential and culturally undersold.
I've been internalizing a really complicated situation in my head.
There was a time when Disney understood instinctively the verve of boyhood. You can see it most vividly in Bobby Driscoll's Peter Pan. The darting eyes, the sly grin, the restless flight of a boy who refuses to grow up. That performance distilled a spirit the studio once bottled so reliably, a blend of impudence, daring, and charm, all energy and mischief. It was not polite or polished, it was exuberant. That same energy ran through the live-action canon of the 50s and 60s. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, was less a film than a national craze. Fess Parker as the rugged boy hero grown large. Old Yeller offered a different register, a boy forced to confront survival and loss, frontier toughness bound to emotional awakening. Swiss Family Robinson was the archetype of boyish adventure, shipwreck, tree houses, tigers and pirates, the fantasy of inventiveness and peril rolled into one. Even as the decades turned and the studio's fortunes faltered, the current didn't vanish. By the 1980s, Disney was tilting back towards pulp and futurism, the black hole brooding in space and Flight of the Navigator whisking a boy away in a sentient craft, a perfect update of the old adventure formula. These weren't initiatives, they were playgrounds on film. Of course, Disney has gone through lulls before. By the late 70s, it felt spent, producing curios more than blockbusters. It was only in the early 90s, with the animated revival, that the brand regained its aura. The present moment is not without precedent. Decline and revival have always cycled. What's worth remembering is that the spark Disney once captured was never exclusionary. Boys' Adventure drew in girls, parents, and whole families because the vitality was infectious. When Marvel came to prominence on screen, it was built on the shoulders of decades of comic readers. The kids and nerds who bought issues of Iron Man or the Avengers in the 60s and 70s, who debated storylines in comic shops, who built the very culture that later became Disney's cash cow. Those fans were the furthest thing from reactionaries or incels. They were dreamers and hobbyists, awkward enthusiasts, and obsessive collectors. Misfits who found meaning in myths of flawed heroes. The stereotype of the angry, gatekeeping male fan is a recent projection, not the truth of the community that sustained these worlds. Disney once channeled that boyish energy and understood that adventure, peril, and playfulness could be universal precisely because they were so particular. It is worth remembering Driscoll's Peter Pan, forever aloft, mischievous, and free, the symbol of a company that once knew the power of boyhood's unruly spark. To recover even a trace of that spirit would be a revival more profound than any corporate strategy. Now, the Great Bell of Moscow, known as the Tsar Bell, cast in the 1730s, is the largest bell ever made at over 200 tons. Before it could ever be rung, a fire in 1737 caused part of the cooling material to crack and a giant 11-ton slab to break off. It still sits, broken, in the Kremlin. The Liberty Bell rang to mark the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. It cracked soon after its arrival in Philadelphia, lending it its iconic fissure. But there remains one bell less smashed than either of these, and that is the one on the screen before you. Its smashing may be a figurative digital one, but is arguably no less culturally significant and consequential. And if you could turn on all notifications, that would be better still.